The readings for the 18th Sunday of Ordinary Time, Cycle C, are very interesting in their lineup. First, there is that book of Ecclesiastes, the great pessimist of the sacred scriptures, Koheleth. For him, everything is vanity. Hard work, study, you name it. It's not going to amount ultimately to a hill of beans. In many ways, he anticipates by more than a couple thousand years the thought of the mid-20th century existentialist, proving one of his points that there is nothing new under the sun. Koheleth was a realist, but not a complete realist. As he looked at the earth and all the things we do, and only looked at that, well, he was right. We should be depressed. But St. Paul, in the second reading, approaches reality from an entirely different perspective. He looked at his fellow Christians and himself, and he saw that all of us were wounded human beings. Yes, filled with vanity, filled with all of those deadly tendencies towards immorality, violence, deception, lying, passion, lust. And he singles out particularly that special weakness, greed, that can be called idolatry. So many people worship wealth, especially in my nation, the United States, where a person's worth is all too often measured by the size of their bank account, their holding, their influence. For 100 years, we've had an expression, he's not worth a plug nickel. On the other hand, someone who's worth $1 million, now that's someone that's important. Koheleth would say that's all vanity, and so would St. Paul. But St. Paul wouldn't despair, because this life, this world, and its values are not the only thing that are a part of the human spiritual experience. He urged his readers to fix their eyes on higher things, on Christ, and to allow faith, hope, and love to flow through the human mind, heart, and soul. This is difficult because the world around us caters to what not is most noble in us, but what is lowest in us, appealing to the lowest common denominator. Now, Koheleth, in listing all the vanities of the world, no doubt if he was living today, would add to all of his other vanities, the vanity of posting videos all over the internet. But if we do it motivated, like St. Paul, to tell the story of Jesus and allow that story to permeate the lives of other individuals as it permeates us, with all of our weakness, with all of our frailty, with all of our psychological, spiritual, and even moral hang-ups and weaknesses, then we're doing something that transcends this world. A husband and wife that love one another. Children that respect their parents. Parents that truly care in a meaningful way for their children. Single individuals who do their daily work with a spirit of joy and dedication. These are individuals that remind the world, whether it wants to be reminded or not, that life is worth living and God still reigns in this world. Now, the gospel passage from Luke is a very interesting one. He tells a parable, a story. A person has become fabulously successful with farming. The crop was overwhelming. He said, what am I going to do? He said, I know, I'm going to build big grain bins and not work for years. Take it easy. I deserve it. I earned it. I am going to have one party after another. Well, that summarizes the vanity of the world and the superficiality of life that permeates so many hearts, minds, and imaginations. Recently, a 15-year-old attacked one of my videos that analyzed a pop tune in a negative way. And this individual said, I'm smart, you're stupid. This artist has 100,000 times more money than you do. And that gives you freedom, that gives you power, that gives you pleasure. She could have any boy she wants. Well, it's true. The individual makes 100,000 times more than I do. It's true that wealth can make life a little more bearable. Some pundit once said that wealth won't make you happy, but it'll make your misery a little easier to bear. But that is an illusion, a glamour, something that seems real but isn't. We just have to read the lives of celebrities to find out how mixed up they are, how desperate they are, how lonely they are, and how hard it is for them to find their way in this world. Some do, like all of us, by the grace of God. Others do for a while and then collapse. That's why in another part of the gospel, Jesus says, boy, it's easier for a camel to go through an eye of a needle than it is for a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. But now, in this particular parable of the man that was successful and stored up all of his grain, Jesus says, you fool, this very night your soul will be demanded of you. And Koheleth would say, and all that grain's going to somebody else anyway. But what if the same person had a fabulously successful crop, and rather than building more storage areas so he would never have to work again, looked around him and saw the weak, the widow, the orphan, said, I'm going to share it with them. I'm going to share it with them. Now, some people might say this type of charity will cause an unhealthy codependence. Yes, sometimes it does. But if somebody's elderly, a widow, someone who's already lived a life that's been productive and needs help, you don't worry about having an unnecessary dependency built up. You worry about meeting their needs. If someone's a child who hasn't learned how to work yet, can't work because they're too young, you don't say, if I give you a loaf of bread, you'll never work for a loaf of bread. They're hungry. You give them the loaf of bread. Now the man could have said, well, there's a lot of young farmers that can't afford to buy their seed. I know what I'll do. I'll give them this seed to get their next year's crop in. They're hard workers. They just need the wherewithal to get the job done. If he would have done that, that would have been a great use of his grain. And if he would have then said, all right, I have enough to get by for this year for myself, and I'm going to work harder next year, what a meaningful life that would be. Even if he died that night and didn't do any of those good works, his heart would have been a godly heart, and he would have been ready to face the God of life and hear the words, well done, my good and faithful servant.